This video is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. Like most everything humanity has built, social media is a tool we can use for good or for evil. It's not all just selfies and Snapchat, memes and memories. We can use social media to establish networks of like-minded people. We can use it to make our loved ones laugh, to keep updated on the state of the world. We can even use it to generate a series of false identities in order to defraud major hotel chains. Okay, well, most of us won't use Instagram to do the last one, but today we'll learn the sordid tale of a young boy cast aside into poverty in childhood who grew up to be one of the wealthiest people on the planet. Or at least that's what his Instagram would have you believe. Today's episode concerns fraud and identity theft, which are crimes. We're not lawyers. Please do not take anything we say as legal advice. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Our story begins in the capital city of Colombia, Bogota. Jose Enrique Morano was born in 1970 as one of the country's throwaway children. Never knowing his parents, he struggled to survive in the middle of the country's ongoing issues alongside his brother. Together they learned that survival was its own reward, and it was priceless. Providence came to them in 1977 as Jim Gignac and his wife arrived in Bogota to pick up the two orphaned brothers through an adoption program. The couple whisked them back to their home in Plymouth, Michigan, where he was given a new name, one that would linger in and out of the spotlight depending on which side of a jail cell he found himself on: Anthony Gignac. By second grade, Gignac could speak English fluently, but his years living on the street had influenced him in ways no one could untangle. He desired wealth, freedom, and, most fervently, he wanted to be important. It began with white lies. He told his classmates that his mother was rich and his biological father was famous actor Dom DeLuise. At age 10, he executed his first con. His mother received a call from a car dealership claiming that her Mercedes was ready to be picked up. Gignac had somehow convinced the owner of the dealership that his father was a wealthy Saudi royal who intended to buy him a fancy car. But when no money and no royal Saudi appeared, the con quickly fell apart. When his adoptive parents divorced, Gignac was separated from his brother, with whom he had been together since they lived on the streets. Something broke inside Gignac. How could they take away the only person that had ever been there for him? Everything was falling apart, and so, after spending time in 2 psychiatric hospitals and a halfway house, he ran away from home at age 17. Gignac surfaced in Los Angeles, where he was caught using a credit card under the name Omar. There, he cooked up the MO that would carry him through the majority of his future schemes. He claimed that he had engaged in sexual relationships with members of the Saudi royal family and was paid millions in hush money in order to maintain the propriety of the Saudi crown. This was not his only identity, though. At times, he claimed to be a Saudi arms dealer. It was an inspired grift and exploited stereotypes of supposed Saudi Arabian regressiveness and the average American's inability to distinguish between a person of Arab descent and a person of Hispanic descent.
Because he was originally Colombian, right?
Right. Gignac, with his new persona in tow, set off for bigger marks. He cheated the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel for $3,500, amassed over $7,500 in limo bills, and draped his beloved chihuahua Foxy in diamonds and Louis Vuitton clothes. After spending a short time in jail, Gignac ran off to Honolulu to stay at the famous Halekulani Hotel for Christmas. There, he conned an innocent couple into writing him a check for $8,500 for a share in an oil field that didn't exist, as well as another couple into paying for the full cost of his stay, a tab of over $20,000. By now, Gignac was in his 20s, and in 1993, he cheated the Walt Disney World Grand Floridian Beach Resort out of $14,000 in credit card charges. He was caught, given probation, then vanished, resurfacing at the Grand Bay Hotel in Coconut Grove. Here he met 2 unidentified men, who he invited up to his hotel room after a shopping spree. Unfortunately for him, they were no saints, as they beat and robbed him. The police were called, but Gignac slipped away, only to be caught in Chicago, where he was finally extradited to Florida to be put on trial for his earlier indiscretions. He was charged with fraud and grand theft, with a sentence of 2 years. Spending time in prison did not deter Gignac from his scheming. Even before his trial, he was contacting lawyers as his new identity Khalid bin Al Saud, which is the name of an actual, real member of the Saudi royal family. Prince Khalid bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the 9th son of the Saudi king Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. One of those lawyers was poor Oscar Rodriguez, who was told that Gignac was a member of the Saudi family and they were going to get him bail. Thinking that Gignac's influence could raise him to the position of legal advisor for the royals, Rodriguez dispatched 2 bondsmen, O'Connell and Marty, to post the $46,000 bail for the supposed prince. The duo picked up Gignac from the Miami jail and drove him back to their office where they waited for the money to arrive. It never did. So the bondsman did what bondsmen do and told him, "We gotta put you back in jail." On the way back, however, Gignac came up with a plan. The prince told the 2 men that there was an American Express office nearby where he could get the money to pay them. He entered the office in tears, exclaiming that he'd been robbed and his credit cards stolen. The clerks agreed to issue replacement cards if, and only if, Gignac could tell them the last 2 transactions the real Prince Khalid had made. Miraculously, he managed to conjure up the answer to corroborate his stolen identity: a transaction made in California and one made in France, making off with a card with a measly $200 million limit.
They actually gave him that?
They actually gave him that. And with it, Gignac immediately went on a spree, buying 2 Rolexes and an emerald bracelet before jet-setting off with the bondsman back home to Michigan in an empty first-class cabin he had bought out expressly for the 3 of them. On arrival in Michigan, he went to a university where he pledged a $1 million donation, and then turned around and booked a flight back to Miami. Not long after they got back, the prince learned that Rodriguez's daughter was being taken from Miami to New York for school. Playing a generous and selfless man, Gignac offered to upgrade them to first class and book out an entire floor of the Four Seasons Hotel if he could hop on board with them. Unfortunately for, well, everyone involved, a call came in from the American Express fraud department telling O'Connell and Marty that their prince was currently committing credit card fraud. "He's not the prince, and he's gonna boogie," said O'Connell to Rodriguez before they frantically jumped on the next flight to New York. Rodriguez also called his wife, pleading with her to make sure he stays in the room. When they finally caught up to Gignac, he screeched, "I'm calling the embassy! I'm not going back to Miami!" To which O'Connell replied, "You're right. You're not going back to Miami. You're going out the f***ing window," throwing the prince across the room. O'Connell didn't end up actually throwing him out the window, but with Marty and Rodriguez's help, they did get him to LaGuardia Airport. Although, as Gignac spotted airport security, a wrench was thrown in the works. Gignac shouted, "I'm Prince Khalid bin Al Saud! I've been kidnapped!" before pointing to O'Connell and screaming, "He has a gun!" Before they could comprehend what Gignac had said, the police materialized around them and threw Rodriguez, O'Connell, and Marty to the ground. "I have a shotgun against my head because they think I've kidnapped a prince," says O'Connell of the incident. Before long, O'Connell managed to show the police his paperwork, and they were released. Determined to get Gignac back to Miami without a hitch, they opted against air travel, and instead chose to drive back from New York to Florida, with Gignac in the trunk. But don't worry, they let him out for breaks. Sometimes.
Wait, but how did he get the answers right to the credit card charges?
Gignac is nothing if not a beguiling man, and he revealed to the bondsman, in addition to his real name and identity, that he had bribed 2 clerks at the Amex office to give him the right answer. Remember the shopping spree he went on after he got the card?
Oh, it was the Rolexes. He bought the Rolexes as bribes for the clerks at the office.
Well done. I knew I hired you for a reason. It's easy to sit back and think, I wouldn't be taken in by a scam like that. But we never really know until it actually happens. The majority of people, if asked if they were in the top 50% of intelligent people in the world, would say yes. But how can that be true?
Intelligence isn't as important as critical thinking, Brew.
Of course.
That's why, since we started researching this episode, I've been watching lectures on the Great Courses Plus.
Oh, you have a subscription. That's great. The Great Courses Plus is a video service with lectures from top professors and experts on all sorts of topics, from history to science to economics. You gain access to a library of over 11,000 videos on pretty much anything you can imagine.
Stephen Novella's Guide to Critical Thinking Skills has a whole lecture about how our culture can impact the way that we think about the world.
It's the entire basis of Gignac scams. The typical person doesn't think much about their cultural biases, and it's easy for scammers to exploit that.
Exactly. Click the link in the description and sign up now at thegreatcoursesplus.com/brew to get a free trial and start learning.
Gignac was released from prison in the early 2000s, but he quickly found himself in prison once more in 2003. He was released again in 2011, but after being caught for more fraud was sent back for another year. In the years, he tried to buy a hotel for $200 million, got interrogated by the FBI, and tried to escape prison by throwing shampoo over the floor of his cell, then lighting it on fire. He's a busy man, you see. But it was in prison where Gignac cooked up his best and final scheme. To pull this off, he needed something he'd never had: access to the lives of the super rich. He found this in the form of Carl Martin Williamson, a British asset manager living in North Carolina. By all accounts, Williamson was much like Gignac, charismatic, larger than life, but he kept his business legit, for the most part. Saudi princess Dalal has said of Williamson that he claimed that he knew everybody under the sun. A coworker said that he was a master global networker whose line of bullshit would change depending on the person he was talking to. Together with Gignac, it was a match made in heaven. Or hell, I guess, because they're doing crime. I don't know how it works. But the point is that Williamson offered Gignac a liqueur of legitimacy. The two of them set out to build a shoddy investment company for the prince, allowing him an excuse to bump shoulders with the world's elite. Martin Williamson International LLC, incorporated in 2015, soon found itself with 26 loyal investors wiring them a total of $8 million for first dibs on the IPO of Aramco, the Saudi Royal State Oil Company, which the actual, real Saudi royals were planning to launch that same year.
For everyone at home, an IPO stands for Initial Public Offering. When a company gets big enough, they go on the stock market, and an IPO is the first chance anyone has to buy stock in that company.
Yes, Gignac and Williamson were fraudulently selling the opportunity to buy stock before anyone else. Where Williamson and Gignac's plan fell to pieces might surprise you. Here's a hint: you can buy it at the grocery store.
The grocery store?
In early 2017, Williamson told real estate agents in the Miami area that the venerable Prince Khalid bin Al Saud was looking for a palace on Fisher Island, one of America's most exclusive and expensive communities, for privacy after a gastric bypass surgery. The duo quickly found one, and the prince immediately offered $21 million for his palace to be wired to the owner overnight. The money never arrived, because it didn't exist. But that didn't keep Gignac from spending like it was the end of the world. He trotted around with bodyguards he hired from shopping malls and dressed up in suits. He claimed every building he passed was in some way owned by his family, and he tipped everyone in $100 bills. A real Mansa Musa of a man. The long con had begun. But before everything came together, Gignac decided that he wasn't satisfied with just a palace. He wanted more. He wanted the famous luxury hotel Fontainebleau, Miami, and he was willing to offer real estate mogul Jeffrey Soffer $140 million for the legendary hotel. Soffer believed that he had found his sucker. $140 million for the hotel was vastly more than it was worth. If this all went through as it appeared, it would be Soffer, not Gignac, who could take the title of Confidence Man. However, as you can probably guess, nothing went as though it appeared. Gignac demanded that Soffer shower him with gifts, as was customary in his country. But that was just a ruse. Nevertheless, Soffer granted him over $150,000 in jewelry and art. Continuing their negotiations, Soffer flew Gignac to Aspen on his private jet, where the prince flashed his Gucci-ensconced iPhone, catching a glimpse of Soffer in a video he posted to Instagram. But everything fell apart when Gignac ordered the wrong dish at one of Aspen's hottest restaurants. He ordered prosciutto.
I I get it now. People who practice Islam don't eat pork. They're not allowed, it would be haram. And if Gignac was really a Saudi prince, he would have known that.
The Quran forbids Muslims from eating pork and pork products. Safar knew this, and the federal agents he contacted also knew this. And they would have caught Gignac in Miami if it weren't for the divine intervention of Hurricane Irma. The prince would remain a prince. But not for long. In November 2017, Gignac, after attempting to flee the country, was nabbed by federal agents at JFK Airport after submitting a false passport at customs. "I'm a diplomat with diplomatic status," he screeched, but to no avail. On May 2019, Gignac was sentenced by Florida court for 18 years in prison for fraudulently assuming the identity of a member of the Saudi royal family in order to build relationships worldwide, including in South Florida, receive gifts, and conduct a large-scale scheme to defraud would-be investors, according to the Florida Department of Justice.
Is this the end?
Not as of yet, at least. Who knows? Maybe Gignac will continue with his old habits from a federal penitentiary. Maybe once he gets out, he'll go right back to conning. Only time will tell.
How many times was he in prison overall?
Let's see. According to my count, he has been in prison at least 5 times, and spending an undetermined amount of time in jail here and there for an overall total of 33.5 years in prison.
And how old will he be when he gets out?
67 years old.
Let's see. When he gets out, he will have spent over half of his life in prison.
It's a little sad, if I'm being honest. Even before that little Colombian boy landed in Michigan, he had already been left behind. When you're thrown away like trash, there's nowhere to go but up, and nowhere lower to fall. Despite the notoriety, the palaces, the Rolexes, and Gucci dog purses, none of it could make him happy. As he said to his personal designer, Perla, a year or so before his final arrest, "I feel so alone at times. It hurts."